parameters in Tableau, if I'm perfectly honest, are one of the features that I just didn't get for a long time. You know, like I knew they were there and I knew, it's not like they were unknown to me, but like their power was definitely lost on me. And as I've come to appreciate Tableau more and more, it's pretty much all about parameters. It really, like at the end of the day, like the things that drive powerful visualizations, the things that make dashboards seamlessly integrate internally are parameters. So let's talk about what they are. We'll do a use case now, and then we'll do a more advanced use case later where we can start to see like the power of parameters not by themselves, but how they relate to things like groups and sets and hierarchies and case statements and things like this. So a parameter at its core is a fixed, or let's call it semi-fixed value. It's like a constant in programming, a constant you can change, but until you change it, it is fixed. And honestly, what sounds more boring than a constant, right? It doesn't seem like these things would be interesting, but they are incredibly powerful. They are incredibly powerful. So imagine, for instance, we wanted to allow a user to examine the top grossing locations. And we've already seen that we can set that through a set like the top 10, for instance. But maybe we want the user to be able to change that, top 5, top 7, and maybe that choice will drive changes in other visualizations or a dashboard or something like this. That is a parameter. That choice, n rather than 10 or n rather than 7, making it general is making it a parameter. So imagine we have a map, for instance. We'll do a whole module on geospatial visualizations. And imagine we have several different data, like we have urban population or rural population or Democrats or Republicans or this thing or that thing. We have a lot of different visualizations that we could put on top of the same map. We could have a user choose which one of those views that they want to display by changing the value of a parameter. And that value of a parameter could then drive which variable actually gets displayed. Imagine instead that we want to, and this is like my favorite one, imagine I have two visualizations in a dashboard, and by clicking a data point in visualization A, I want to update something about visualization B. The way those two visualizations are connected is via a parameter. That's pretty much, I mean, honestly, why these things are so important, because parameter values are seen equally by every visualization in your workbook. And so if I have visualization A, visualization B, and visualization C, they can, each one of them, see the value of each parameter in the workbook. And using things like dashboard actions or parameter choosers, we can actually have users update the value of a parameter and have that influence multiple visualizations at once. In other words, parameters are the glue that hold multiple visualizations together and allow them to behave in kind of more interesting and complex ways. So let's actually just dive straight in. We're only going to do one example right now, so I don't want to divide it into multiple videos. So let's go ahead here. I didn't clear this from last time, and get started. So the first thing we need to do here is create a parameter. So the kind of weird thing about parameters is that you specify them like independently of any variable. They're just values, right? The way we tie them to variables comes later. But for the time being, it's just a constant of some type. So we say create parameter, and we'll call this top n GPs threshold. GDPs threshold. It's a very common way to use a parameter. This parameter is going to be an integer, which is a value without a decimal, so it can be positive or negative. And we'll say the range here, and we get to specify, we'll say, I don't know, 5, 50, with a step size of 1. Sounds pretty reasonable. We'll deal with these other ones later. These, like the allowable values, we'll talk about that later. Okay. So right now, now we have this new parameter down here. It doesn't seem very interesting. Like I said, it's kind of like, well, okay, whatever. But the power comes when we start to do this. So let's go to country regions, create a set, just like before, except we're going to say the top here. And then what are we going to do then? Well, how are we going to do this? Let's go to by field. We'll say top, and then the key here is not a 10 anymore, but say by top n threshold. So we're saying that parameter that we just made a moment ago, that's going to be our value. And we're going to do this by GDP average. So notice the key difference between this is when we made the static set to begin with is instead of specifying a specific value, we're going to do this by a parameter. And so let's make the same thing that we made earlier. We're going to do country region in rows, and then GDP as our, let's do it as columns. We'll do a bar chart. We'll make this average, and we'll sort this thing just like we did earlier. And now, and then we will color by top and GDPs. So this is what we did earlier, all of this. And now the only other thing that we need to do is two things. Down here, we click and we say show parameter. And this gives us a slider here. And the slider allows me to change how many. So I want to highlight the top 15, highlight the top 15. I want to highlight the top 20, highlight the top 20, whatever I choose. And remember, this is kind of a boring example, but it's an example that confirms that this is doing what we would expect it to do, which is important. But for instance, we could have this membership drive color changes or behavior changes in other visualizations. We could have it exclude certain points by filtering, a lot of different things. But basically, this is confirming that it's doing what we want to do. This set membership is dynamically changing based on the value that we put here. If I want 10 members, I get 10 members. If I want 20 members, I get 20 members. And this, again, is a user controllable feature now. Really, really cool. The other thing that I love about parameters is a thing that's, we're going to start making these things look nicer and nicer, and kind of getting more and more towards production quality. One of the nice things is that we can actually use parameter names in titles and things. So we'll say top, and then we can actually say insert here, parameters, economies. So this thing in these the greater than less than signs, less than greater than signs in this case, is the value itself. You can see how it's kind of grayed. You could also type this out. Often it's easier just to do the insert. And notice that now when I say, okay, I get top 10 economies, if I change this to 20 or whatever, it's top 20 economies. And that will automatically update, even if this thing is in a complicated visualization, if it's in some dashboard or whatever you want it to be, it will automatically update. So this is, again, one step towards making these really production quality visualizations. And we're going to get there one step at a time. But confirming that all this stuff works together is the first way to do that.